Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This is Professor Walsh here. I have your week 12 lecture pre-recorded here. I will have it up and running on the web courses LMS by tomorrow afternoon. We got to do a little bit of media conversion on the files and clean it up a little bit, and I'll have it uploaded for you folks in time for your normally scheduled class time, which obviously by now you all have adapted to and transformed into an online participation mode. So I thank everybody for putting up with the sort of bumpy transition. You may have determined by now that the facilities on campus are closed, and therefore I don't have access to the studio and the workspaces that I typically would do demonstrations in, or even the wider format that I was using previously. So we're going to an all on-screen mode this week. It'll be a little bit difficult because the content is dealing with concepts that are better demonstrated with physical demonstration, with tools and equipment that I can introduce you to in person. But we're going to wade through this anyway this week, and I will endeavor to put some tutorials online as well at some point. We're only 2 weeks from the end of the end of the coursework for the semester, and then we will have a study week and a finals week. So we kind of have our back up against the wall in terms of how much activity planning I can do at this point. I know that some of you had expressed an interest in a shooting assignment this semester, and while I was fully willing to implement something like that at this point, I think with all of the setbacks and constraints that we're dealing with here, and the fact that we can't check out any gear or use any of the facilities on campus at this point, I think that that's an idea that we'll have to forgo this semester. Hopefully we can get life back to normal by the fall, certainly by the fall, hopefully by the summer term, but we'll see how that plays out as well. I hope you're all safe and healthy at this point, and I hope that you're all having success making the transition to total online participation at this point. So let me move to the web courses LMS here for a moment. We're going to be talking about section 6.2 part 2 today, which is dollies, sliders, and jibs. Before I do that, though, I want to direct your attention to this is where I get your guys' emails. If you send me an email, it pops up in here, whether it goes through Outlook first or not. Okay, this is within the system, and I get notifications through Microsoft Outlook as well when you have sent me an email. So if you do reach out to me with questions or concerns, I do see your messaging, and I will address those in due course. Some days are heavier than others in terms of the Q&A and the emails that I have to return, but I will get back to you as soon as I can. So don't lose faith in this system. This is the best means of communication that we have available to us right now. So let's all embrace the email system within the LMS. I also want to turn your attention to the announcements. Okay, so I've had a steady stream of emails now over the course of the last week where folks are telling me they still don't know how to handle the lecture as an assignment. Okay, so I just want to point out to you that there are at least 6 announcements that I have made here so far in the last week and a half that are telling everybody how to deal with the assignment on web courses. Okay, but I'm going to go through it again for you folks really quick right here so that you've heard it from the horse's mouth and there's no ambiguity, because this is your participation grade at this point. Okay, So what you need to do is you need to go to the home page. Okay, here we are at the end of our module menu, which is kind of an encouraging thought. We're at section 6, exploring cinematic movement. Last week was 6.1, basic movement. Here's the lecture assignment. View the lecture assignment. Okay, when you open up the lecture assignment, of course, you're going to see my view. You're not going to see the student view. Here's what I can do, though. I can go over to my tools and I can show you what you see. Okay, so if you go to the lecture assignment, you're going to have the information here, and then you're going to have the actual video itself. Okay, and then while it's not showing it here because the assignment's now closed, up in this corner right up here there's going to be a submit button. Okay, and the submit button is for when you have sent me a text message. If you go below the page break or the page fold, which is about here, instead of seeing previous and next, what you're going to see is a text box with a bunch of the word processor tools above it. And in that box, you're simply going to tell me that you saw the video, you watched the video, done it, it's done. Leave me a brief note if you want to. If you have any questions about what you saw, you can leave that in the box as well. And then you have another submit button at the bottom of the page. So you can hit either one, the one at the top or the one at the bottom. Don't hit submit before you've left me a text message, or I won't get verification that you've seen it. Okay? So you need to let me know when you've seen it by just leaving me a quick note. I saw it, I watched it, I saw the video, thank you very much, whatever. Okay, the minute you create the text message and you hit submit, then SpeedGrader will tell me that you have left me a file, and that's how I know that you checked into the assignment. Okay, so that's how you need to deal with these lectures. Okay, that is the only way that we can have accountability at this point that I've been able to figure out, so that I know that you folks are still attending the lectures. Okay, so I mean, if we were still going to campus, you guys you'd be reporting to the room at 3 o'clock or 6 p.m. on Mondays, and we would have the lecture together. Okay, and well, I would love that to be the case. At this point, it's a little bit too risky for folks' health. And so you're now responsible for reporting in and watching the lecture. Now, what I've done to accommodate all of the difficulties and all of the adjustments that we have to make is I'm leaving the lecture open all week. So you have between Monday afternoon, when the lecture opens at 3 p.m., until Friday night at midnight to go in, access that lecture, watch it, and send me a text message that says you've seen the video. Okay, you've got all week to account for having seen the lecture, okay, which is more time and more flexibility that you would have had if we were still in our face-to-face campus mode. Okay, so I know that this is perfectly reasonable, and therefore this is how we're going about accounting for your attendance at this point. You've only got the lecture for today, which is 6.2, lecture 12. Next week will be the final lecture, 6.3, lecture 13. And then the regularly scheduled coursework for the semester will be concluded. And what I'm working out at this point is whether or not I can host a Zoom session on the following week, okay, which would be, let's see here, it would be April I think it's the 14th? 20th, okay. That would be, let's see, we're going to be here. Then next week is Gimbals. The week after that is our study period, the 13th, okay. And then we're going to have our final scheduled somewhere in here-ish, okay. Be somewhere between, the 20th and the 27th. I guess what I might do is open it early and give you folks the opportunity to take it at some point between, say, the 21st and the 27th. It will be a timed exam, just like normal, okay? But I'll have a much longer window, I think, so that everybody has the opportunity to access it and take the final quiz or final exam at their leisure. Okay, so this is what's going on. I want everybody to be clear on that because, like I said, I'm still getting emails, people asking me they don't understand what's going on. Okay, this is going to be now the third week that we've been in online mode, so it's very simple. Okay, if after 3 weeks of going to online mode you still don't know what's going on, that means you're not checking web courses frequently enough. Okay, now you're on your own recognizance because everybody's at home and working from home. Okay, which means I don't know if you've seen my lecture on Monday night, Wednesday night, or Friday night. And quite frankly, I'm fine with any of those situations as long as you have attended the lecture, because content in the lecture and or the readings and or the videos constitute your quizzes and then your final exam. Okay, so you need to be looking at this material at some point in exchange for the credit for this class. Okay, so as I said, we're in section 6.2 this week. Everything that you need for the quiz that opens tomorrow is, in terms of the decks, are loaded here now. So deck 11, which was camera movement part 1, is already up. And you have all of these decks to look at and to study from. If you are having trouble accessing any of these files for any reason, please let me know. Otherwise, these are all of the lecture decks in PDF form. And where possible, I am putting in new lectures for prior sections of this course. Okay, I have most of them prepared at this point so that I should be able to have at least 8 of the physical lectures in place by the study period. Okay, but in lieu of that, if there is no video posted for the lecture, you have the PDF version as always to study from. Okay, so here we are. We're at section 6.2, dollies, sliders, and jibs. So your readings for the week will be your downloadable PDFs, which are right here. Okay, the Art of Motivating Camera Movement, that's the Laura Wells white paper. Okay, and here it is. And then you have chapters 1 through 5 in Cinematography Theory and Practice, the 3rd edition. So that's the blue-brown book. Okay. Chapters 1 through 5 are the Laura Wells PDF. Okay. And then the chapter on camera movement is from the blue-brown book. Okay. So you folks should have your copies of the blue-brown book by now. Camera movement is also featured in the 2nd edition to some degree. So you can glean much of that information from the 2nd edition if you only have the brown book at this point. Whenever and wherever possible, you should have the blue edition, the 3rd edition. Any of the extensive videos that I cover in the lecture are all here embedded into web courses, so they're not links to YouTube. They are actually embedded within the LMS, so you shouldn't have any problem accessing that content as long as you have Wi-Fi. The remainder of the calendar is here. So Monday the 30th, which is our next class period, you are going to have quiz 5, and it will occur online. Quiz 5 is about, I think, 25 questions, and you have like 30 minutes to do it. So it's pretty standard. It's the same type of quiz that you've been taking all semester. Okay. And if you look in your quizzes menu, it'll tell you basically what the basis for that quiz is. If we go to quiz 5, it's composition and framing. Okay. And it will be due on midnight of the 31st. So that is Tuesday at midnight, or one tick before midnight, 11:59 p.m. on the 31st, which is Tuesday. Okay, so this is all the stuff that we covered in the past couple of weeks in and around the spring break. Okay, so let's move forward now and take a look at the deck for this week. Okay, So we're looking at deck 12, so it'll be L12 in your PDF, on your PDF documents page, and it'll be L12 video that you'll be looking for on my YouTube channel. So it'll be L12 section 6.2 camera movement part 2, and it's part of our cinematography 1 series. Okay. And today I want to talk to you about camera movement using specific tools, the dolly, the slider, and the jib. Now, when I say dolly, that's a fairly broad description of a number of different tools. I'm going to show you the equipment that we'll cover in Cinematography 2 very briefly, so you understand the concept from the top down. But the dolly that we're going to talk about today is the Matthews or the Modern Studio Equipment doorway dolly, which is available to you folks at the stage through the Office of Equipment Management in the film department, and you can access that tool, check it out when you are working on your projects and so forth. I would recommend, because of the disconnect now this month and the online engagement, that at your earliest possible convenience, whenever we are allowed to return back to campus for some semblance of normal life, that you check out the equipment room and make sure that, or set up a time where you can go in and look at some of this equipment in person and just apply some of what you've learned to a quick hands-on. You can ask anyone in that department for a quick demonstration of the equipment, and they'll be happy to do it for you given the time. And just acquaint yourself with these tools so that the next time you have the need, or you're shooting a project, or you're working on someone else's capstone project, for instance, or somebody's MFA thesis film, that you'll have a little bit of hands-on and some awareness of what these tools can do for you. All right, so this is part 2. We're going to talk about the skate wheel dolly, the doorway dolly, the slider, and the travel jib. Okay, so years ago, in days of old, when I was a young man just getting in the film industry, this is what a dolly shot looked like. Okay, there were very few alternatives to this method. Okay, we wouldn't necessarily put a dolly track up on a rostrum like they have here. This is specifically because they're working on uneven terrain and they wanted a fairly high camera angle on the action taking place. We got a person holding an umbrella for a framing aid. So apparently there's some kind of digital element that's going to appear in the frame here. And what he's doing is he's holding up an object that the operator can use to frame with, so that he can accommodate enough frame room for whatever element this is going to be. Probably a creature or a cartoon character or a monster, or some kind of CG creation that will be composited into the final film, and so this is for reference. But he's up high on rostrums. They've what we call laid a rail or laid dolly track. It looks like each one of these segments is about 8 feet long. The clips are where the track's attached, so I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's at least 6 or 7 sticks right here, which would be 7 times 8 would be a 56-foot dolly run. So this is a pretty big dolly run. This is what it would look like. The grips would would install this on the set when it came time for this shot. The cinematographer would call for a number 1 or a start point, and then a number 2 or a finish point, and then the grips would execute laying the track for the shot. A track like this on rostrums looks like it's on maybe A-frames or on sawhorses. Something like this would probably take the grips about an hour to build. So that would be about a 60-minute liability for you assistant directors out there who are concerned with the scheduling and the pace of the shooting day. You would want to allow ample time for the grips to build something like this and get the dolly set up on the track, and then get the camera mounted up and everything balanced and ready to ride. That's a good 1 hour to hour and a half investment of time. The dolly is going to be an expensive tool to use, but it is one of the most, at the end of the day, it's one of the best means, one of the stablest means of getting these very stable, solid camera moves where we can use virtually as long a lens as we want to get as tight on the framing as we want, and not have a series of bumps interfering with the flow of the shot. It's very important to some content that we get these controlled, smooth, glassy dolly shots without a lot of dynamic framing or shake. That's often present, for instance, in the handheld modes that we discussed last week. So the dolly remains, after all of these years, one of the most stable and reliable means for getting these kinds of shots. I got a video here. I've featured it in the materials under videos for you to watch here, and it is directing camera movement. I'll let it play here. It's only a few minutes, but if you want a bigger screen, then I would say opt for the embedded copy in the WebCourses LMS. So here we go. Let's take a look at this really quick. It's from Studio Binder. It's pretty informative, and I think it'll set up the conversation for what remains of the deck.
When we think about memorable camera directions, we may think of those high-up crane shots, or elaborate long takes, or robot arms. But why do we really move the camera? When is a slow push in on a character more effective than a static shot, or vice versa? Why would this shot,
shit just got real,
not work for this scene?
She's been murdered, and you think I did it.
Next to directing actors, directing the camera can be one of the most challenging tasks a director takes on. So it's important to know what tools are available to tell your story visually. So let's fill up your toolkit with the most common and not so common ways of directing the camera. Let's start with some of the basic camera movements in any cinematographer's arsenal. First up, the pan. The pan can be a fast-paced whip pan like Paul Thomas Anderson is fond of using. It's the equivalent of quickly turning to see something. It creates a jolt of energy. Conversely, the slow pan gives us time to take in the landscape. Next up, the tilt. You may not realize it, but one of the most effective opening shots in history is the tilt. Tilts often reveal something to us, subtly redirecting our attention. Next up, the zoom. The zoom can be a funny kind of punctuation because of its sudden nature. Our next shot is the dolly. A smooth movement often on a track, which moves the camera through a space, creating a different type of visual experience than the zoom or pan. Vertigo was the first film to ever combine the dolly and zoom at once. This is called the reverse dolly zoom. It's become a favorite of many filmmakers to show a character having an intense internal experience. Next, let's look at the pedestal shot, which moves the camera up and down. Here it's used to reveal the stakes of a scene in Inglourious Basterds. Another impressive three-dimensional move is the crane or boom shot, which might also tilt the camera and use a larger range of motion. The showdown is coming, and Sheriff Will Kane is left alone to protect the town. Next, the Steadicam or gimbal. Steadicam or gimbal shots like this one can have the same effect as the dolly, but because the camera is stabilized on the camera operator, it gracefully glides within a space. You can take that even a step further with the handheld shot. The handheld shot moves the camera through the space much like the Steadicam or gimbal, but it also has a raw, shaky feeling that creates more anxiety in the viewer. And lastly, we'll take a look at a type of shot that doesn't physically move the camera, but moves the lens, the rack focus. By racking focus, you bring something to the viewer's attention. All of those camera moves are fairly common knowledge. What really makes a great filmmaker is how you can combine them in unique ways. If you shoot scenes on sticks, but then go handheld for a sudden, violent fight scene, well, then you got everyone paying attention and literally feeling the camera choices. Take a look at this shot from Straight Outta Compton. the shot slowly ventures through the party, starting up above the party, then lowering down to a camera operator, who then takes it into a swimming pool, and then hands it off to another operator. The effect? We, the viewers, feel like we're there. How about this shot from the circle? It starts as a drone shot, but it's soon handed to an operator who glides the camera through the sequence. By combining shots in unique ways, you can direct the camera to create an engaging experience. Free shot listing software like Studio Binder makes that part much easier. It lays out all of the most common shot, angle, equipment, and gear choices for you as checkboxes, so you can think more creatively and combine them in new ways. Yes, there are a lot of camera moves, and a lot of ways to combine them. But before you strap a camera operator to a drone and fly him off a cliff, ask yourself one important question. Do you have insurance? But then ask yourself another question. How does this support the story? You don't want the viewer to notice the cinematography, you want them to notice something in the story. The visual language is always evolving, and filmmakers have new tools available to them every day. But in the end, they're just tools, designed to move something else. The viewer's point of attention. When filmmakers rack focus or dolly in, all they're really doing is directing the audience's eye to something. If you start thinking about where the audience's eye is pointed, then you're truly moving the camera with a purpose. Watch the sequence and notice where your eye is throughout it.
Without anybody getting wise, the IRS or anybody. Now notice how in the count room nobody ever seems to see anything. Somehow somebody's always looking the other way. Now look at these guys, they look busy, right? They're counting money.
This sequence is about following the money. And from shot to shot we do this with our eyes, our point of attention. From hand, to briefcase, to table. What's moving across the frame and through the sequence isn't just the camera and the objects in frame, but also our eyes. Now, check out this sequence. The energy of this moment is frenetic because Cuarón has us looking all over the frame. Our point of attention goes from one upper corner to the opposite lower corner as we try to follow the subject as she's hurtled through space. We don't even know where to look. It creates chaos, anxiety. Both sequences are excellent and serve their stories in different ways by understanding how to manipulate a viewer's point of attention. Thinking about this will ensure you won't use any unmotivated camera moves. However you choose to move the camera, the real object you should be focused on moving is your audience's attention. Think about what you want the audience to focus on in each shot and why it serves the story. Then think about what devices and movements can help you achieve that. Because if you're moving the camera without thinking about where the audience is looking, they're probably going to start looking at their phones. Really? If you like the video, make sure you share and subscribe. See you in the next video.
Okay, so that's from Studio Binder. I like what they're doing here. And they're giving us a nice sort of generalized conversation about camera movement. And you can start to think about these different modes as I reveal them to you here. And think about your mission objectives when you decide to move the camera in the first place. So last week we talked about all of these primary translations. Okay, and a translation is nothing more than a fancy word for move, right? But if the camera moves from point A to point B, there is a translation that takes place. And it's how does the camera move, okay? So in icon number 1 here, we have the arrow running laterally under the camera. This is an indication of the dolly in or dolly out mode. Number 2 is the pedestal up and pedestal down, or boom up and boom down. Number 3 is a lateral translation, which we call the tracking shot. So that's either tracking camera right or tracking camera left, based on your actors or action moving in the frame. Okay. Translation 4 here is indicating the pan, and translation 5 is indicating the tilt, and then translation 6 is your autonomous movement indication here. So one really easy autonomous movement to remember that everybody's familiar with is the Dutch angle. Okay, so that can be a locked off Dutch angle, or it can be a moving Dutch frame, okay, where you start, for instance, in a normal horizontal mode, and then you Dutch the frame as the action evolves within the scene, okay? So if it's a character coming to a realization, for instance, or if it's kind of like the Roy Scheider shot in Jaws, whenever a character's point of view or perspective is changing before our eyes, sometimes the Dutch angle can be used to approximate what the character's headspace is all about in that moment. Okay, and one thing that hopefully will become apparent to you during the course of these 3 weeks of studying camera movement and studying all these modes or tools will be that oftentimes you can perform many, if not all, of these translations with any of the pieces of gear that are available to you. So then that gives rise to a fairly understandable and reasonable question, which would be, well, then why do we have all these different tools? Well, the answer is somewhat simple. It's going to come down to accessibility. It's going to come down to budget. It's going to come down to time. In other words, how long does it take you to get that piece of equipment ready to work on set? So is there going to be a time deficit if you use one piece of gear over another? A lot of times the gear that might take longer to set up might also be cheaper than gear that can be accessed and used readily or quickly. And then it's going to come down to control. How do you control the framing? How do you control the move, the duration, the speed, and precision? How well you can control, or what degree of error do you have with that tool? Okay, so there might be times when you have to choose between a doorway dolly and a studio dolly, or you might have to choose between a Ronin or a Steadicam. Okay, and in each of those cases, there are going to be certain factors that are going to contribute to your choice. Okay, so budget-wise, a doorway dolly is always going to be cheaper than a studio dolly, but a studio dolly has far more capability than a doorway dolly. And the same with a Ronin versus a Steadicam. And the very first thing that I always think of when I'm choosing between a Ronin and a Steadicam is, how much does my camera weigh? What camera am I using? And would it even fit on the Ronin? Can the Ronin support the weight of that device and whatever peripherals I'm going to put on it? Lenses and screens and matte boxes and whatever, batteries and so forth. Okay, so while you can get the same translations with all these different kinds of gear, there's going to be moments or restrictions that are going to sort of direct your choices towards the best possible outcomes with the best piece of gear. Okay? And that's really what this is all about, to just give you a sense of awareness of what all these pieces of gear will do, and then you can make those decisions for yourself when the time comes. All right. So I want to talk to you about the Dolly Shot. So the Dolly Shot is going to be the first translation we're going to talk about today. The Dolly is a device which travels on tracks. You've seen that already in the first images. The camera is mounted on the Dolly, and it records the shot as the Dolly moves. The Dolly Shots have a number of applications and can provide very dramatic footage. A Dolly Shot is also known as a tracking shot or a trucking shot. Now, we used to use trucking once upon a time to describe pretty much any translation done on the Dolly, whether side to side or in and out. But over time, we've become more sophisticated in our capabilities and in our lexicon, and so now we're differentiating these shots to dolly in, dolly out, tracking right, tracking left. Okay, so we don't hear the term trucking so much anymore. Some people will use it interchangeable with tracking, okay, which is fine as long as we are clear that we mean a lateral movement, which moves with the flow of action, and not a dolly in or a dolly out, which is generally moving perpendicular to the action, okay? So as long as we are clear about that, it's okay, I suppose, if you use tracking and trucking interchangeably. So professional film dollies often have a feature which allows for vertical movement in concert with lateral movement. Okay, so in other words, you have a boom incorporated into that dolly. It runs on hydraulics, and it is going to give you similar translation to what a jib or a crane will do, but on a very small scale within a much tighter framing constraint. Okay, so if you're dollying or pushing in on camera into the action within the frame and then slowly booming up to go from, say, a low wide shot tracking into the action to an eye level shot of a particular character, you would do that on a studio dolly. Okay, it would be the best tool for that kind of move because it would have the most control and precision. Now you could also do that with a gimbal. Sure, you could, but it, are you going to use a gimbal if you're shooting with a fully built Alexa? No, you're not, because it's not going to be possible. You're going to need a studio dolly. But are you shooting on, for instance, a small red camera like a Red Raven or a Canon 5D? Then sure, you can be on that gimbal all day. Okay, it all depends on what other tools you're trying to incorporate into that shot at the same time you want to do the dolly in. Okay, some dollies can operate with track, some without track, some can do both. This offers the greatest degree of movement, assuming, of course, that the suitable surface is available, meaning flat enough and firm enough to where the dolly can roll smoothly without seeing any bumps or swells in the shot. Okay, special dollies are available for location work, and they're designed to work with common constraints such as the width of a doorway or the softness of sand on the beach. Okay, dollies are operated by the dolly grip. And in the world of big budget filmmaking, good dolly grips command a lot of respect. They are paid well for what they do because it's a specialty, and they're also of late considered more in association with the camera department actually than the grip department, because the dolly grip is always going to be where the camera is. Okay, either helping supply or move the camera support, or physically moving the dolly, or spotting the Steadicam operator, or tethering and safetying a camera operator who's working from a high platform. Okay, the dolly grip is always going to be around the camera at that point. So ostensibly that dolly grip is not available to perform any other grip functions on set, like working with the lighting crew, or pre-rigging a set, or any number of things that are going on within the grip department at any given day. The dolly grip really is confined to the camera and what the camera is doing. So for that reason, a lot of times they consider the dolly grip more part of the camera department than actually part of the grip department. And it might be useful for some of you to know, for instance, who are interested in a career in the camera department. I personally know a few grips who were dolly grips in the beginning of their career and ended up camera operators in the latter parts of their career. And I can tell you that I happen to be one of those people. So being a dolly grip, well, you might think it's the furthest away from a DP as you can get. The reality is it's really not, because in the moments when that camera is moving, you're there with it. And so you're going to understand the dynamics of camera movement and what happens within a frame when the actors are doing that dance with the camera and the support that goes along with the camera. And so you're going to have an intimate understanding of what that relationship is, and that would make you, in the long run, a better camera operator. So keep that in mind. In my Cinematography 2 classes, we drill down on the camera movement concept to include the studio dolly system in our studies. Now, with Cinematography 1, I limit it to the doorway dolly, but I just want to show you a quick glimpse of the Chapman hybrid studio dolly so you get a sense of what to compare these other pieces of equipment to. All right, so The doorway dolly, as you're going to see in a little while, is a certain kind of device, but the comparison is always made in relation to what its studio counterpart is capable of. So here's a look at the Chapman hybrid dolly, and I'll just show you this, only a couple of minutes long. You'll get a sense of what that equipment looks like.
The Hybrid 4 adds many design improvements over its predecessor, the Hybrid 3. Versatility and adaptability are at the center of this new design, which dramatically improves the performance of the three main functions of the hydraulic dolly, with a brand new wheel and axle design, a more accurate and smooth hydraulic lifting arm with more lifting power, and a host of brand new accessories that come as standard. The camera dolly's central key function is to provide smooth movement of the camera in any direction, either on a flat surface or mounted onto track. Chapman Leonard can provide you with 3 different tyre compounds for smoother tracking results over different surfaces. The Hybrid 4 employs a brand new design in its wheels, which has dramatically reduced the rolling friction on a floor surface and when the dolly is used on track. So you can now execute straight tracking shots without disengaging the tab locks on the axles of the dolly. Overall, the maneuverability of the Hybrid 4 is greatly enhanced by its 3 steering modes, selectable directly through the rear steering control bar when operating on a flat surface. Conventional mode turns only the rear wheels to steer the dolly around the front wheels and the center of the camera axis. Crab mode engages all 4 wheels to turn in unison, allowing dolly movements in any direction without affecting the camera plane. Round steering mode, which is a new feature for the Hybrid 4, allows even greater maneuverability by engaging opposite steering on the front and back wheels. Round mode works with the Hybrid 4 legs set to any position, even folded inward to reduce the footprint of the dolly, giving you a minimum turning radius of just 20 inches. You can turn the dolly exactly on the spot if need be. Changing between the steering modes can be done on the move without stopping. To help an operator with selecting only the steering modes they need during a dolly move, control pins on the handles can be set to limit which steering modes are selectable at any time. Grips will love the Hybrid 4's new Quick Jack system that enables easy repositioning of the Hybrid 4's dynamic legs in seconds. There are 2 quick jacks supplied with the Hybrid 4, so even wheel changes are now possible on the spot. Dynamic axle legs are a key feature taken from the Pee-wee dolly. They allow the Hybrid 4 to be used on several different gauges of track, to aid stability with off-axis loads, or to reduce the size of the dolly on set. This feature is great for transportation, tracking shots where there's narrow access, or when you just need to get in close for your shot. The most significant feature of any Chapman Leonard dolly is the hydraulic lifting arm. Smooth and silent, it allows for a dynamic change in lens height during a shot, or to position the camera in a secure locked-off position at different heights. The hydraulic arm has now been perfected to move in a perfectly straight vertical line, eliminating the need to pull focus on a camera move ending with a close-up. The lifting capacity of the Hybrid 4 arm has also been increased to carry up to 700 pounds, bringing it close to the performance of the larger Hustler dolly in terms of its ability to cope with large camera packages. The additional lifting power in the arm allows the Hybrid 4 to become a mobile platform for small jib arms, such as the Stinger seen here. With the rear control columns removed, full rotation of a jib arm is possible in a 360-degree arc. power is nothing without control though, so the arm has been redesigned and engineered with new bearings to ensure incredibly smooth, accurate and silent operation. The Hybrid 4 features a built-in automatic oil heater to ensure smooth operation even at very cold temperature. The ride-on performance of the Hybrid 4 is also enhanced by the inclusion of a dedicated nose seat for operator comfort and safety. A familiar feature that hasn't needed updating on the Hybrid 4 are the use of coloured Velcro markers for plotting start and stop positions when using the arm. A set of control levers located at the rear of the dolly under the removable footplate allow you to preset the arm's position and adjust the sensitivity of the start and stop speed of the arm. Known as feathering, this feature is most useful for ensuring consistent preset movement of the arm over multiple takes. Also brand new to the Hybrid 4 are two different modes for controlling the hydraulic arm's movement. With normal mode selected, the arm's travel has a sharper movement when switching directions. Float mode, which is new to the Hybrid 4, changes the characteristics of the arm's movement to a flowing motion. Operators will find they can achieve a more fluid and subtle change in the arm's direction with float mode selected. The redesign of the arm extends all the way to the Hybrid 4's new levelling head. The GQ head is a 4-point levelling system with a built-in locking mechanism for instant repositioning or offsetting of the camera mount. By depressing the locking lever once, the head can be turned and will lock into place at 18-degree intervals in 20 different positions. Alternatively, free pivoting of the head in any direction is possible by pushing the cam lever button as you depress the main lever. The Hybrid 4 comes with a choice of two heads, both with a Mitchell mount. Standard accessories for the Hybrid 4 include risers for the camera head and high-low plates with a removable 7-inch extension piece for further reach. The high-low plate can be underslung or overslung for a change in lens height in a matter of moments. Chapman Leonard has incorporated a quick release registering pin to help locate the plate during this operation. The Hybrid 4 accessories also include a 90-degree bracket for mounting the high-low plate, so you can achieve a wide range of off-axis camera positions for all kinds of situations. Chapman Leonard have also redesigned all the walk-around boards for the Hybrid 4. Walk-around boards can be configured in many different setups depending on requirements, something camera operators and assistants will appreciate as they provide a much more stable platform to work from. Hand-tightening registration pins and locking latches provide a secure method for attaching walk-around boards. And the Hybrid 4 features a hinged front footplate with locking pins, a time-saving feature when changing from high to low mode setup and vice versa. All the accessory boards come with a tough, non-slip rubber matte surface, the same finish as found on the top section of the Hybrid 4 chassis. Completing the complement of detachable platforms on the Hybrid 4 is a large ride-on platform for a camera operator when standing in an elevated position or during a moving shot on the arm. Chapman Leonard have successfully combined over 40 years of engineering innovation and by listening to film professionals and their needs, created the Hybrid 4. A camera dolly for a new century in film production, combining the very best features of the Chapman Leonard camera dollies into one superb design. The Hybrid 4 gives you the precise control, ease and flexibility of use expected of equipment in today's film and television industry. Contact your nearest Chapman Leonard outlet in the USA for details and demonstrations, or visit the website to learn more. Chapman Leonard, putting the move in the movies.
All right, so I think we can all agree that that's some pretty amazing capability out of that particular tool. So that's a highly capable piece of equipment. You can see how many different ways you can control camera translation, and you can see the degree of precision that's possible with that piece of equipment. Okay, they have a number of other dollies in their arsenal. This is a very brief clip that will show you my cinematography 2 students at a Chapman Leonard open house in Orlando. This was last last semester. And you can see the Cinematography 2 students go in for a full day of comprehensive dolly training at their studio facility in Orlando. And we take a look at several of their dollies. So they have the Super Pee-wee and the original Pee-wee dolly featured here. And they also, on this day, brought out for us a hybrid system, one of the original hybrid dollies, for us to take a look at. So that's something that we cover more in depth in Cinematography 2. But I want you to see the gold standard, right? So that now you have something to compare to. All right, here's a brief, here's a snippet from a video that I like a lot. It's on YouTube. I've got it embedded in LMS as well. It's by Chris Fisher, who's a camera assistant up in the Vancouver market, I believe. And this is a day in the life of a dolly grip. This is just the first 2 minutes of this particular video. If you want to check out the full video, like I said, it's embedded on the LMS for you. You can check it out at your leisure. But basically, this is going to show you what it's like to work on set with dolly equipment at some of the higher budget levels of production. Okay, so enjoy a quick look here at a day in the life of a dolly grip. The dolly you see right now featured in the POV camera is the Fisher 11. This is another company in Hollywood that creates dolly platforms, the JL Fisher Dolly Company. Okay, so now that you've seen the dollies in action, you see what they look like, and you see what they're capable of, you can understand now when you see these translations diagrammed out for you, you can fully understand what movement is possible with that equipment. So what we want to do now is we want to talk about some DIY solutions or some low budget solutions that you folks are going to have more access to in the course of your early career at the very least, and certainly while you're here at school. I've been working very hard to get a Chapman Pee-wee package installed at the school on a consignment basis from Chapman Leonard. That's a deal that we should have in place by next fall. But in the meantime, there's certainly the doorway dolly. I'm going to introduce you to the skateboard dolly concept. And there's a number of other pieces of gear that are available to you right now to help you get some of these nice precision moves in your camera projects. Okay, so we've got the dolly push in and pull out, the boom up and boom down, and the track right and the track left. Okay, So let's take a look really quick. This is from an independent film that I did a number of years ago. The shot was following the character Dale as he rides his bike to visit his friend Paige, who is working as a teacher at the local elementary school, or high school, as it were. And the shot starts following Dale on his bicycle. And then we have to bring Dale into the school grounds on his bike and right up to the classroom where he's going to encounter Paige, who's working on a course experiment that she's preparing for the students. So let's take a look really quick at a scene involving tracking shots in the film Hey, I'll Believe You. Okay, so the shot starts, and I'm just going to turn my sound off here for a minute. The shot starts on a tight frame, and then we're following that same little keychain as Dale's driving to school on his bike. That first shot was done from the back of a camera car, rigged up with cameras so that we could drive alongside the actor as he's pedaling through the parking lot. This is Dave Bache, and as he's pedaling along through the parking lot, we can keep him framed up. And then as he comes around the corner and onto the courtyard at the high school, we've then switched from the pickup truck mode, okay, which is what this shot was grabbed on and what this shot was grabbed with, okay, the back of the camera car. And now we're simply on a dolly track, which is running about 30 feet laterally, tracking along with him and letting him ride right up to us. And this is the same. This is another tracking shot using a traditional dolly. Okay, so there's 4 different shots in that opening sequence in that scene. A couple done from what we call car to car, which is camera car to moving vehicle, and then so 2 shots from that platform, and then 2 tracking shots on dolly track. In this next sequence here, we see this is 2 characters that are going to walk in. This is Officer Senna, and he's reporting to a grocery store that's been robbed, and he just has to take some notes and inspect the condition of the scene of the crime so he can start putting some notes together and pursue the culprit. And here's Dale again. Dale's asking for Officer Senna's advice on how to solve a problem at his job. And so the 2 of them are going to walk and talk, and we're going to follow them with the dolly. And then at the end of the shot, you're going to see where we add a little extra layer of complexity and see if you can figure out which tool we use to do that. So here we go.
It's 5 minutes exactly every night. And that's not all. The call comes in at the same time every night. Okay, so, I mean, what does that mean?
I don't know, Dale. I mean, maybe he's trying to call another alien.
You saying he's trying to call another alien who's only home for 5 minutes every night?
I don't get it, Dale. Someone comes in, they trash the place. They steal all the electric toothbrushes, and they leave the money.
Yeah, the call, Senna. Why 113 to 118?
All right, now you're talking numbers, Dale. Look, I think you need to talk to Paige. You know, she's the scientist.
Good idea.
Okay, so it starts off pretty simple, right? The 2 guys are at the door, and they're going to walk down the aisle while Senna's taking notes, and Dale's asking Officer Senna how he can figure out the identity of an individual who's calling into his late night radio talk show. Okay, so at the end of this long walk and talk, we're going to sink down and get a low number 2 on the final few lines of the conversation. Okay, so that was using the hydraulic boom on the Chapman Pee Wee Dolly. It got us all the way down the aisle at eye level, and then at the end of the shot, when Officer Senna's action calls for him to squat and examine some things in detail at close range, all we had to do was boom down on the hydraulic lifting arm, and we could get this essentially, it looks like it was about 24 inches off the floor. This low angle shot on Officer Senna taking notes at the scene of the crime. So this is using a traditional dolly, okay? But it's not always necessary to use a traditional dolly. For instance, I'm pretty sure on this shot here, which is another investigation on the part of Officer Senna, the same movie, a trophy shop has been robbed. And so Officer Senna is going to go in to the location where there's still noises coming from inside, and they think that it's entirely possible that the perpetrator is still inside the trophy shop and he hasn't quite made his getaway, and Officer Senna is hoping to capture him in the act. And I'm pretty sure for this series of shots that we used the doorway dolly to accomplish the angles that you're going to see next. So let's take a look at another scene from Hey, I'll Believe You. This is the trophy shop.
Sure. What's going on?
Not now, Jimmy. All right, this is an ongoing investigation. Wait over there. Right after you open this door. Let's move, Jimmy!
What is it?
Maybe it's a menu from an intergalactic space diner that would serve like Neptune nachos and Jupiter juice.
I think you're just hungry.
No, I think it's definitely a menu from an intergalactic space diner. That's the only possible explanation.
Okay, so what you saw in the beginning was a quick backwards dolly out as we brought the boys in through the front door, okay? It was a low angle looking up, basically, to accommodate the awning, which was blocking the bright sky, and the low angle looking up avoided some unsightly details that were basically right across the street. So when the fellas walk into the trophy shop, what we don't want to see is all of the junk across the street at ground level, and we don't want to look up into the bright sky either. So the idea was we're going to look up into the awning and we can control the exposure, and at the same time we can bring them in the door. And the rest of the move is just part 2, is a long dolly track about 30 feet of basically rubber wheels on carpet. This was done on the doorway dolly. It was because of space limitations and time limitations. This wasn't the only thing we needed to do this day, so the fellas just used the doorway dolly. And right here you can see that you have the illusion of the camera syncing like it could do on the hybrid dolly on a hydraulic arm. But what actually happened was they were on a tight lens dollying backwards, And as the fellas got closer to the engraving machine, they simply zoomed out on the lens and gave you the illusion that they had actually boomed an arm down, when in reality all they did was zoom out. So even though you don't have the expensive hybrid tool to use, some days you can't afford to have that piece of equipment on the payroll, so you make do with what you have. And so we got the illusion of a boom down by just zooming out on the lens, and then used the doorway dolly rubber wheels on carpet so that we didn't have to lay rails and we didn't have to wedge things up and get the track level and spend a lot of time at this location, because we had a couple of other locations we needed to shoot at that day. And the more gear you pull off at your first location, the more you got to clean up before you can company move to your second location. So the wisdom there was, we'll just do it on the doorway dolly and get the shot, use the zoom. It would be fine. It would look totally fine on camera, and it worked. I think it worked quite well, actually. So here's the notion. This is what it is. The idea is you need wheels under your camera so you can move your lens. Okay, so the type of wheels you're going to use, the type of support system or platform you're going to use is going to affect the quality and the precision of the translation, right? So it can be as simple as a skateboard. I mean, I've encouraged my students to do this kind of movement on their student films fairly frequently in the past. Because sometimes you don't have a lot of gear, you can't afford to go rent anything, and you're certainly not on a film with a budget. It's a student project, let's say, or a capstone project, but you want to put a camera move in your shot, in your scene, and so you start looking around for anything that you can think of that might help you move that lens. All right, so I've had students use skateboards, I've had students use wheelchairs. And you can put a seat a camera operator in a wheelchair and push them along on a reasonably flat floor and get a nice handheld moving shot that way. You can do it on a bicycle. You can do it in the back of a truck or through the side door of a van. There's a number of different ways that you can get camera movement without having to have a lot of expensive equipment at your disposal. Okay, here's a video. I think I've got just the first couple of minutes of this highlighted for you. You can watch the full film on web courses. This is from Ben Harvey Photography, and he's talking about making a homemade skateboard dolly. Okay, so if we take a look at the first couple of minutes of this, you'll get an idea of what this is trying to, the point that they're trying to make here. All right, that's a neat little film. At the end, he tells you spent $18, or, well, the equivalent, 18 UK pounds on the total rig. So he went out and bought himself a little CUDA sidewalk surfboard and a few pieces of hardware, and attached his tripod head to the skateboard and got himself some nice low, what we call worm's eye view camera translations, which can look really good on a student film. One of the aspects of student films that is sadly lacking that I've noticed in recent years is there's not a lot of camera movement taking place, and that could have to do with a number of factors, not the least of which is, folks don't have all of these tools at their disposal, either in numbers sufficient for everyone to have access, or sometimes the institutions themselves don't have the inventory to offer. But if that's the case, which it's not really the case at this school necessarily, there are a number of modes of translation available in the equipment checkout room for you to explore. So it's not so much an issue here. However, sometimes the question comes up, hey, can we move the camera for this shot? And it's Saturday afternoon and you don't have access to campus, or the equipment lock up, and you have to sort of wing it, or come up with a quick DIY solution on the spot, okay? And the principle behind a lot of these DIY solutions is the skateboard wheel, okay? So what you can do is you can do one of two things. You can purpose build a specific kind of skateboard dolly, go to all the different places, all the different stores, and gather your parts and supplies, okay? Or you can invest in a set of what we used to call boogie wheels, okay, which is it's a kit of wheels, of which this is one component, okay? You need 4 of these, okay? This is a quad system. This is a boogie wheel quad system, okay? And basically, it's got a pass-through bolt hole on the top of this thing. All you need to go with a set of boogie wheels is a nice square piece of plywood, maybe 2 by 2 feet or 2 by 3 feet in dimension. Drill 4 holes, run the bolt through the boogie quad and up through the plywood, and nut it on the back side, and you got a dolly platform. And then all you need are a couple of pieces of PVC, and you can strap your tripod to the top of this thing, and you can move that camera for as far a distance as you can by lengths of PVC. So what's the longest piece of PVC you've ever seen at Home Depot? Maybe 12 or 16 feet. So that's quite a distance, actually. Most dolly runs that we'll do on a major feature will be somewhere between 16 and 30 feet. So if you can get an 8 to 16 foot dolly run out of a couple of pieces of PVC that costs you about $5 out of pocket, you've just added a huge amount of production value to your student film at a very minimal expense. Okay, so this concept is part of this video, okay, the skateboard concept that I have embedded for you in web courses as well. From Darkroom Studios, it's called How to Build a Camera Dolly the Right Way, okay? So the person who's narrating this video, these are some screen grabs from that video showing you how the wheels ride on the PVC, how it's spaced out. You can put little notches in 2x4s and make what we call railroad ties so that your pipes don't roll around on the ground. You can see the one back here has got a notch in it. You can see the notch right there. And this is how it floats on the rail, right? And this is basically the same thing that's happening with these big studio dollies, right? You got the studio dolly track, and the wheels are riding down the rail, right? And this is the same basic concept in a nutshell, which is, you've got 2 points of pressure on either side of the pipe, and then you've got that same amount of surface contact in each of the 4 corners of the platform that you want to use. This is a 2 by 2 foot piece of looks like particle board here. 3/4 of an inch thick, and that'll roll very smoothly down 8 to 12 or 16 feet of, this looks like conduit. You can use conduit or you can use PVC right on the ground itself, and you'll get a very nice smooth tracking translation out of a PVC tube dolly. And this whole thing, I can tell you, if you buy these wheels in a kit, you can get them at glidegear.com. All 4 pieces together are about, I think they're $130 or $150 for the set. At that point, all you need is a $5 piece of PDX from Home Depot, that particle board you see featured in this photograph, and another $5 worth of PVC pipe, and you're rolling down a rail for next to nothing. And all you need to do is save these in a little toolbox or in some kind of case so that you can travel with them or whatever you want to do, and keep them handy. Keep them in the trunk of your car with the rest of your grip kit or whatever, and you'll always have them available, and you can pull them out at the last minute if you want to add a quick side-to-side slide or a quick dolly in or a dolly pull out. All you need is a piece of wood to strap your tripod to, or to stand on, or even to sit on. You can sit on this Indian style, or put an apple box on here and sit on the apple box and go handheld, and get a nice glassy move. It's very well controlled. It works like a charm. We use these on bigger movies. Okay, it's not unusual. So I have a couple of examples. Here's a dolly reveal. Okay, so in this shot, it's towards the beginning of the film, and we see Dale. The character's name is Dale Sweeney, and he's a radio DJ who has a late night talk show about UFOs, right? So it's a comedy starring Dave Bache and Patrick Warburton, Mo Roca, and a number of Chris Elliott, a number of different comedians that you've probably seen and heard of. And it's a cute little independent film. And this is the opening scene. So we're going to see Dale in his radio station, opening at the start of his radio show. And it's just a way to get into that scene and start the visual momentum of this movie by getting in and dollying in to reveal Dale in the studio and his partner in the control booth. And the whole film has a sort of a visual theme of kind of a floaty feeling, since the concept is all about time travel and UFOs and a lot of silliness like that. So the visuals are based on a floating camera that kind of appears like it is gliding through the scenes or floating up in the air and seeing people from unusual angles. And so we used that concept and chose a handful of different pieces of gear to get that, to create that tone or that feeling in a lot of scenes of this movie. So here's the opening reveal of Dale in the studio.
The inconceivable. People always ask me, isn't it a waste of time to ponder these questions if we never get the answers? And my answer is yes, but what else are you going to do between midnight and 5:30 a.m.? Welcome to another edition of Hey, I'll Believe You. I'm Dale Sweeney. I am joined tonight, as always, by WMEL's famous, or should I say infamous, the dreaded, the mystical, the three-headed, iron-fisted ruler of the airwaves, Craig the Engineer. Craig, like Einstein himself, you too are a mad dreamer, forever living on the outskirts of human thought. How are you tonight, Craig?
Okay, so the opening shot is actually a push-in on David, which gets a little bit buried under some of the graphics. But the scene starts with a push-in on Dave, and then we do that rapid pull-out and what we call a counter move. So we pull out from Dave and we counter, we pan around to shoot across Dave onto the engineer, Craig, in the engineering booth, to create that, that lighthearted little moment where we're introducing two of the main characters of the film. And the idea was just to get that lens moving as soon as possible in the storyline, because that was going to be a recurring theme. So when the camera comes to rest, those are very deliberate moments where you kind of notice when the camera stops moving, and you take note of what's happening in that shot at that moment, in those moments when the camera either starts floating, demonstratively, or when the camera stops moving. Those create moments where there's at some point a focal point that's happening that you're supposed to be paying attention to. All right, so here's a doorway dolly. All right, this is what it looks like. This one is looks like a Matthews doorway dolly, or something modern studio dolly with a wooden top. Okay, there's also the modern studio version with the cheese plate rigging platform on top, as opposed to the plywood. The plywood can be nice if you want to like maybe screw a hi-hat to the top of the dolly so that it won't slide around while you're doing your moves. The wood is a little bit lighter. It's also less expensive, but this has a lot more rigging options if you want to use different types of camera support. If you want to rig a jib pedestal to this thing, or a bazooka base, for instance, and then put a jib or some kind of crane on top of the doorway dolly. The aluminum platform with all the cheese holes in it offers a huge amount of rigging flexibility. So both of these dollies look like they have the roundy round track wheels. So you see how the steering end, the wheels will turn side to side, and then when you are in roundy round mode, the dumb wheels also will turn, and you can make a nice tight circle just on the pneumatic wheels here. You don't need any track or anything. Now, you don't want to do this on a bumpy surface or on a pebbled driveway or on a in the grass in the yard, because those surfaces aren't smooth enough to roll on. But you can roll very effectively on a garage floor. You could roll very effectively on the floor of a gymnasium, on the floor in an office building, on carpet, or on terrazzo, or on parquet, or on bare concrete. As long as the surface is relatively smooth and flat for the most part, the rubber pneumatic wheels, so they're air filled, are spongy enough to where it takes a lot of the swell and bump out of your move, and it'll give you a fairly stable platform with which to track and dolly with. Okay, so this is the doorway dolly. So you guys have these available to you on campus, and you can check them out for your student projects and so forth. Now, obviously, they don't have the pneumatic lifting boom like the Chapman Dollies do, but you can still get a great deal of work done even with a doorway dolly, and add that much more dimension to your shots. There's nothing nicer than to be able to add a little side-to-side slide, even if it's a subtle creep move and not a fast, swishy move at all, but just a nice, steady, slow, deliberate move to emphasize some part of the action, or to emphasize a tense or sensitive moment in the dialogue. All of these types of moves are important, and they add a huge amount of dimension to the tone of your film, and they can be done very simply with some very simple tools. Okay. This is a video that I will let you guys check out at your leisure. It's the Elliott Turner Prima Doorway Dolly system. He describes how the dolly is constructed, and then of course he's got a website. He custom makes these. You can order doorway dollies if you're so inclined. You could order one of your own. They're not terribly expensive, not as expensive as you would think, but this is somebody who has done a video, who is a custom dolly builder. So the dolly moves with pneumatic wheels, and it's designed to roll on the floor. Okay, so you have certain constraints here. It's got to be a level surface. It can't be a multi-level surface, because the dolly obviously isn't going to roll downstairs or over rocks or down slope on a hill or anything of that nature. But as long as you have a level terrain that's reasonably smooth, you can get nice side-to-side or dolly in and out translations. Another way to get a shorter range of movement would be on something called a camera slider. So this is a standard slider. It's a manual slider. Basically, you mount some kind of support head on here. This happens to be a ball head for photography, but you could easily mount your fluid head on here, and then your video camera. and just basically push this little truck down the rail system. And this one looks like it's about 30 inches. So you get, something just under 3 foot side to side move, or in and out, push in or pull out. And that can be more than enough, believe it or not, in the variety of circumstances. A lot of times what we're looking for is just enough movement to add some dynamic tension to a shot. And a lot of times it's just, 2, 3, 4 feet worth of movement. Not a lot at all. Something that you wouldn't want to use a huge dolly with and bring up a lot of 8-foot rails and start leveling and laying track and taking a lot of time. Sometimes it's happening around a table, 2 people chatting over a cup of coffee, and you just want to get that little over-the-shoulder reveal, or that little push in for emphasis, or whatever it is that you visualize in your script. These little moments that are very nice, that add so much more dimension than just a static locked off frame, right? Static frames, after a while, they can get very monotonous and very boring, and these camera movements help to engage your audience and bring them in and get them immersed or involved in your story. So there's a tremendous amount of value in understanding how these systems work and what they offer, the tone and value of your film. So in 1999, a couple of guys from the industry came up with the idea of the slider. So we had Ron Vito from the Society of Operative Cameramen and Jerry Giacalone, and they used their experience to create the first sliding camera platform. They called it the slider, and it was basically a cheap set of stainless rails that were bracketed together, mounted on either end with a tripod, or light stands for that matter, and a movable carriage that was on bearings, okay? And you could attach your camera and you could slide your camera back and forth. The first generations of sliders that came out were fairly noisy. I have one still to this day because if you're not recording sound, it is the best slider that I own because it will carry the most amount of weight. It will carry up to a 75-pound camera easily and give you a smooth, glassy move because it's 2 stainless rails, solid stainless rails, and a full set of stainless ball bearings that are transporting the carriage from end to end. And so while it's kind of loud in terms of bearings on steel, the move is super smooth and super steady and can support an enormous amount of weight. So I could put a fully built film camera on that slider if I wanted to and get a perfectly smooth move. The problem would be it would be too loud for sync sound, but sometimes it's more about the movement and less about the sound. You can either do ADR on your dialogue if you need to get some clean dialogue, or it might be a move that you want to add to a fight sequence, for instance, in which case you're probably not recording sound anyway, or not critical sound, and so the noise from a stainless ball bearing slider would be the least of your problems in terms of choreography and safety and convincing camera angles to sell the idea of 2 guys just beating the hell out of each other. So it's not always the sound is not always the biggest or major concern that we have when using a slider. It can often be the feasibility of that piece of equipment for the shot we're trying to pull off. Okay, but the idea behind the camera slider is to give you the ability to shoot compelling tracking shots that you can set up in a matter of minutes and you can be executed and on to the next shot. You don't have to spend a lot of time with it because it's a tool that you can use in a quick and dirty way to get quick, small, short moves without setting up a full dolly system. Okay, so the slider at work, here's an 8-foot, I think this is a Cinovate slider. And this guy's using it to get a tracking shot around the front bumper of a Kia for a car commercial. Okay, so on a long lens, let's say he's trying to get a nice grill shot with the car's emblem on the front hood, and it's one of those things where you track through the emblem and along the grill, and you end up on the headlight. It's a money shot. It's one of those shots you see, 100 times in a season when the car commercials are running, say in the fall and during the football season. It's a pretty common time to see a lot of car commercials on the weekends. And, this is a staple shot from a car commercial, is to get that front grille, that logo headlight tracking combo. And you can do it in the studio. This is on a white cyc in a studio in Hermosa Beach, and this guy's using a Cinovate hand-operated 8-foot slider. So no automations necessary, although there are now robotic sliders available where you can control the whole thing with a little handheld toggle, or a lot of them have software that you can load into your iPhone, and you can turn your cell phone into the automation controller through an app. And you can set a start point and a stop point. You can pan and tilt the camera with motion control equipment that you can purchase with these sliders. And you can get some very sophisticated looking shots from a tool that's as simple as this. Now, he's got it set up on 3, inexpensive tripods all the way down on the legs, so you can get a nice sort of grill level shot of the front of this car. And then it's just a matter of rock and roll back and forth and getting that shot. You do it as many times as you have to until you get the right feel, the right degree of speed and smoothness and the right tilt and pan action going on. And you can add an immense amount of value to your car commercial, for instance, with a tool like this. Now, let's see here. I've got slow tracking with emphasis using a slider. So here's a scene from the same little independent film, I'll Believe You, where Dale is talking live to an anonymous caller who's calling into his radio show. And it's just giving you a sense of his frustration and the monotony of dealing with all these different callers while he waits for this one specific guy to call in on the show. So take a look at how we add just a little bit of side-to-side motion to these shots to add a little bit of tension to the scene.
As always, be on the lookout for the unusual and the unexplained. I'm Dale Sweeney, the only man who will believe you.
Okay, so it's just a little bit of a move, right? But you could do that shot static, or you could add a little motion to it just for a little bit of extra dynamic tension, The end of a long night. He's just done 8 hours on the radio show from 2 to 6 in the morning, and, the tone, the feel of the scene is sort of lethargic and tired, and the camera is moving in a very slow, steady, we call it a creep move, okay, a little creepy move. It's just a very slow, deliberate, not even very long. A lot of times these moves are only about 2 or 3 feet, but they add a lot of dimension to the film. Here is another exchange between Dave and I believe this is the exchange between Dave and Patrick Warburton when Warburton is describing that he's a time traveler and he's come from the future to visit Dale Sweeney in his present time frame. And so we have a little bit of a dolly side to side going on. It's the rock and roll movement side to side, constantly going, but it's slow and small and very sort of, you almost don't notice the camera moving, but it's just enough movement for the audience to psychologically tune in and understand that a small translation like that signals to the audience that they should be paying attention to some subtle detail that's being revealed to them. See if you can catch the camera moving.
4162. Okay. Right. So, smart guy, tell me, what's the future like 2,000 years from now?
It's nice.
That's great. So you live on the moon, in the space station?
Hartford.
Connecticut?
Why don't you let me explain why I'm here?
Yeah, you know what? Seeing as how you've basically turned me into the village idiot, that would be appreciated.
When I was a boy, my parents took me to the Zumtella Museum, world-famous history exhibits. Amazing stuff. You'd like it.
Well, they had this display, a controversial new discovery, a plaque that scientists claim was 2,000 years old.
So what's so controversial about a plaque? I mean, we hand them out like candy.
Well, this one was written in our language, a modern universal language not in use for 1,500 years after the plaque was supposedly made. This is that plaque. First time traveler arrived in this spot August 2nd, 2006. What could it mean? Science had already proven reverse time travel was impossible. Yet if this plaque was genuine, someone had done the impossible. They left this as a marker, but was it real? See, this plaque was our Loch Ness Monster, our UFO, probably a hoax. But all my life I wanted it to be real. And from the first moment I saw this plaque, I knew it would be my life's work to solve the mystery.
So that's why you built a time machine.
All right, so I don't know if you picked up on that or not, but the movement was very subtle, very slow, and very small. Because basically, we have a moment where one character is trying to convince another character of something that would seem highly unlikely and, quite frankly, silly or bizarre if he wasn't in fact telling the truth. And so there's a moment in here where we need the audience to take that leap of faith with us as the filmmaker and say, he really did come from the year 4000, whatever it was. And that the reason why he came was this artifact and the fact that he's a scientist and he dreamed of doing it since he was a little kid. And turns out that his character is actually the first time traveler, and so it's a very warm-hearted little movie. In fact, if you're at all interested in the concept, I have put the entire film on web courses for you. It's called Hey, I'll Believe You. It's about an hour and a half long. But since we're hanging out here and we're all quarantined anyway, it might be just a thing for an early evening one night when you want a little lighthearted comedy to take your mind off things. But check it out. It was an independent film, so it didn't have a very big budget at all. I think we did it for just under $1 million. We had all these great actors who contributed their time for next to nothing, and it was really a labor of love. And the idea behind making a film like this, when you don't have a lot of money but you've got good talent that will sell the performances for you, is just figure out the best ways of the most reliable ways of recording those images and doing it with a little bit of flair, with a little bit of style. And even though you can't afford the most state-of-the-art or the most expensive tools available in Hollywood, if you've got a little bit of inspiration, some DIY know-how, and if you understand what the big boy tools can do, you can a lot of times extract the same performance out of some very simple solutions, like a skateboard or a skateboard dolly. So don't be afraid to experiment with these things. I want to show you a couple of behind the scenes clips from this is Bad Boys 2, where we had this is my 8-foot heavy duty slider. This one has been since retired from service, but it was another stainless bearing, stainless rail slider, super heavy duty. But when you're getting the kind of shot that we were going for on Bad Boys 2, you can see how it wasn't about recording the sound in that situation, because it was just a quick clip, a snippet in a series of clips that consisted of the gunfight at the Klan rally. And it's a moment, it's a brief moment on screen. So it wasn't about the audio, it was about the camera angle and the camera movement and whether or not we could get a precise movement manually manipulating this 8-foot slider. So you check it out and tell me what you think. And if you've seen the movie, you'll recognize the shot almost right away.
3, 2, 1, go!
This is just a little bit of setup right now. Okay, here it is.
Set. You're going a little too far. Pull in your back. Feel your back. Go in there. Emerson. Ready? Ready, and action. Gotta get closer to the gun's gotta get closer to the camera. Action. A little slower. Action. Turn a little later. Martin. Action. Turn a little bit later.
So the frame in the lower left is the actual film, and the frame at the top was the behind-the-scenes cameraman. There's the shot. That's it. Did you catch it?
Mike, where are they? Where's backup? Hey, whoa!
Did you catch it? It's a brief moment. It's not even, it's maybe a second and a half, 2 seconds on screen. Okay? And I think we did that shot about 8 times. Until the dolly grip got that move down exact in the timing. So it had to do, the actor has to pull his revolver from his belt, and Martin needs to sit up and look in his direction, and all 3 pieces have to end up in the frame at the same time. The muzzle of the gun has to be at Martin's face at the same time the dolly grip puts the lens right there to see the action happening. And all 3 people had to get their move timed perfectly. So it was a choreography, it was a dance to get that moment to happen precisely on camera. And it was for maybe 2 seconds in the final edit. Okay, but it adds that movement, and that extreme framing adds just that much more energy to that scene. Okay. So we've talked about the doorway dolly, we've talked about the studio dolly in contrast, we've talked about making a dolly out of skateboard wheels, and we've talked about the basic slider. Now I want to talk to you about how we get that floaty booming feeling, and we're going to do that with something called a jib, okay? Now this is a travel jib. This is, I used this little indie jib in class to demonstrate the principle of jib movement, of booming up and down. It's a very small, light-duty piece of gear, but you shouldn't be discouraged by it, because what it is it is a tool based on scale. Okay, so it's a small travel jib that can collapse down into a little Cordura pouch, and you can throw it in your luggage and take it with you on a trip to the beach at spring break, and you can get little jib shots from your balcony if you want to, or down on the beach, or whatever you're doing, right? But jibs come in sizes that range anywhere from this little travel jib, which is about 5 feet of total scope, to something as big as an Aquila crane at 120 feet. So the word jib it's a little bit it doesn't explain, it doesn't give you a full sense of the variety or the scope of this tool in terms of the size and applicable camera translation that you can achieve with an arm that could be as long as 90 or 100 feet long. Okay, so the jib is a concept based on a fulcrum, on a base, counterweight, and then the overall length or extension with the camera at one end and the counterweight at the other end to basically create, it's the teeter-totter effect. If you've ever, as a small child, spent any time at all on a playground, you got to be familiar with the teeter-totter. You get on one side, your buddy gets on the other side, and you take turns bouncing off the deck, going up and down on the teeter-totter. This is the same thing. The only difference is you've got a camera on one end, and the length of either end can change, and they don't have to be equal. So you can see that this has got 2 sections, 2 segments that can extend out from the fulcrum. This side's only got 1. So you can get the extra length on this end to get the camera high up in the air, and then to compensate for it against the fulcrum, you have to add the appropriate amount of counterweight or ballast. Okay, and so that's the principle behind a jib. All right, so a jib, what is it really? Okay, the jib is, let me move this for a sec and get this up out of the way so we can see. The jib is a boom or a booming device with a camera on one end and a counterweight and controls on the other end. It operates just like the seesaw at the park, but with the balance point located close to the counterweight, so the camera end of the arm can move through an extended arc. Okay, a jib permits the camera to be moved vertically, horizontally, or a combination of the two. So you can get nice sweeping movements, you can get nice rise and fall or climbing and diving movements, or a combination of the two. So a jib is often mounted on a tripod or on some kind of pedestal base, and then that base can either be operated static on the deck, or you can mount it on a dolly. And so now you can move this jib. Imagine having a dolly track and a doorway dolly with a travel jib strapped onto it, and then you could get the long, flat, horizontal translation on the dolly, and at the very end you could jib up in the air, let's say, and get as high up as that jib will allow in terms of its extendable capability. So there's a great deal of flexibility in this tool, and it becomes even more flexible and more capable when you combine it with the advantages of other tools like a doorway dolly. So it's useful for getting high shots or shots which need to move a great distance horizontally and then maybe vertically without the expense and the safety issues of putting a camera operator on a crane or a crane shot or laying track for a dolly. A jib can be mounted on a dolly for shots in which the camera moves over obstacles such as a conference table, someplace where a normal dolly shot couldn't be achieved. Okay, so a jib is somewhere, it's somewhat more complicated than a simple lever, since the camera's arm needs to be almost always controlled independently of the swing of the jib arm itself. Okay, so a jib is often used in conjunction with a remote camera control or a remote controllable head, where you can control focus and zoom on the lens, and then you can control panning and tilting of the camera itself. And you can do this with the use of a portable video monitoring device. Okay, so the jib's going to have a lot of flexibility. This one collapses down, like I said, into a little sleeve about 24 inches long by about maybe 4 or 5 inches in diameter, and you can throw that in your luggage and take it with you on your next trip abroad, right? And so you have a little something you can do if you're shooting. Now this is featuring a mirrorless camera or a DSLR, so a little travel jib like this is not going to support, for instance, an Ursa Mini 4.6K, but it'll surely support a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera or a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K camera or a Canon 5D or a Z camera. Okay, you can put a lot of those compact new digital cameras on something like a travel jib, and you can get quite a bit of difference out of this tool. Just that much more sophistication that's far better than static shots off of a tripod. Okay, so here is the VariZoom Solo Jib, which is a slightly bigger, a little bit more payload I think you can get on the Solo Jib, but I'm going to show you just the first minute and a half of this demo video. The rest of it is featured on web courses. You can watch the whole thing at your leisure, but I want you to see the Solo Jib in action for the first minute or so.
Today we're going to take a look at VariZoom's new product, the Solo Jib and the Solo Slider Dolly. Let's open up these cases. So this one is the Solo Jib. This one is the Solo Slider and Dolly system.
Okay, so you see right away, we start off, and he's on the tube dolly. Then he adds the jib, and he's getting this nice floating action, rise and fall. The same shot that our other fellow was getting on the slider, the grill shot, but now he's added a floating or a booming up and down sensation to the frame as well, which can add a nice dimension to the shot. Okay, the other thing that this is going to offer is flexibility in positioning. So I want to show you a clip now where again, from I'll Believe You, it's Dale at his broadcast desk again in the studio. But think about, a camera on a tripod, and even if it's on a doorway dolly, for instance, the minute you drive that dolly right up to the far side of the desk, that's as close as that lens is going to get. Okay. Now, let's say you wanted a peculiar angle that was more extended up out over the top of the desk. You're not going to get that on a tripod, even if it's attached to a doorway dolly. You need to be on a different kind of device. Well, the jib can get you very quickly into that position, and you can lock the jib off and, you know, basically operate the locked off camera from a high jib position and get a variety of different angles that you wouldn't be able to get from the surface of the dolly or from off the floor on a tripod. Take a look at this scene and see if you can spot the shots that were done on a jib.
My name's Dale Sweeney, and I'm here to believe you.
Hi there, Dale. First time caller.
Go ahead, amaze me, Stu.
It's the Kennedy assassination, right?
Yeah, with you so far.
Okay, strap in. It was an alien conspiracy. You see, Kennedy knew about Area 51. Who do you think crash landed out there? Kennedy was an alien.
Well, okay, wait.
So this shot is actually off the dolly, tripod on a doorway dolly. But as soon as we show you that OTS over Dale onto the microphone,
I'm sorry, I thought
that shot was done on a jib.
I don't actually
okay. So this shot here was also done on the jib. If you very quickly want to change positions, go from a low eye level to a high bird's eye view to over the shoulder, you can get those shots very quickly
Dale Sweeney here, believing all you
by incorporating a jib into your shot list. Okay, even these low angles, you see how they're slightly Dutched? Okay, you can't get that off of a tripod. Okay, you either have to come off the tripod and go on a sandbag on the surface of the table, which is fine, except that this table was completely art directed, and see all the tools and apparatus and coffee and paperwork and everything that was on the desk. So we would have to move that and then replace it every time we wanted to put a sandbag on the top of that desk and get that low angle. But on the jib, you just boom down, tilt the camera up, and you have that point of view very quickly from the jib. Okay, and that makes shooting go very quickly in a scenario like this. So let me play it for you again without me talking all over it and see if you can spot the jib shots.
So far.
Okay, strap in. It was an alien conspiracy. You see, Kennedy knew about Area 51. Who do you think crash landed out there? Kennedy was an alien.
Well, okay, wait. You're saying that John F. Kennedy was actually an alien? What's your proof for that, Stu?
Proof? Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought this was a contest. I mean, I don't actually believe that. My bad. Sorry.
I'm looking for a caller who's going to give me something good. Okay, something mysterious and something that you actually believe in. Now, who's next?
Hitler was at the DMV in front of me. I was down there.
Dale Sweeney here, believing all you tell me.
Why haven't we gone back to the moon? Because the moon landing was a hoax.
The show is stupid, and I deserve the $1,000.
Well, that's nice.
Is that weird enough for you? It is the weirdest thing I could think.
This is Dale.
I need this money, man.
Dale Sweeney here.
Are these calls real?
This is Dale.
Did I win?
Cash.
People, look, the idea of the contest here is to call in with something that you actually believe and then make me actually believe it. Something that will make all of us sit up and say, holy moly. Next caller, you had better be good. Caller?
Okay, so what did I show you here? About a minute and 30 seconds, right? Inside of that minute and 30 seconds, there are 13 shots. Okay, that's one shot every 10 seconds. Okay, if that. So when you have that kind of shot list on your call sheet for the day, what camera support are you going to choose to work from that's going to give you the flexibility that you need to get that many different camera setups in, say, 2 hours? Okay, to shoot the entire scene, get it lit, get all the different camera angles, and then, you know, be broomed out and moving on to the next piece of business. Okay, if we had done all of that deliberately rigged with all the different pieces of equipment that we would have needed to get the camera in all those different positions, would have took us far longer. But on the jib, we could do those 13 setups very quickly and very easily, as quickly as it takes to simply move the tripod from one point to another on the floor. You can have the whole rig moved if it's mounted to the dolly. Drive that dolly around on the floor and then position the camera exactly where you want that frame at the end of the jib, okay? Whether you're leaning out over the desk, high up pointed straight down, low pointed up vertically at a steep angle, over the shoulder in space, okay? Or on either side of the microphone on a Dutch angle looking up at Dale. All of that stuff could be done in a matter of seconds as opposed to minutes or tens of minutes of setup any other way, and you end up getting 13 shots inside of 2 hours of work, and you're moving on to the next scene. So that's the flexibility that a jib can offer your workflow if you know how to utilize the tool properly. So here's one more use of the jib, and this is from an aesthetic point of view. Like I said, the whole visual portion of this movie is based on a floaty, ethereal, otherworldly feel, right? So visually, what piece of gear do we have that'll give us that feel? The jib, because basically you can float the camera. It can go up high and it can sink low in the same move. It can swing in wide arcs that swing up high or swing down low, and you can run it side to side, end to end, in and out on a dolly as well, on a track. And add that extra dimension to your move. So the jib played a huge role in this movie, and the camera was on the jib every day for at least half the day. Okay, so the jib was a critical piece of equipment on this particular movie, and in certain moments in the film, we used the jib to communicate an idea, which was that this guy, who turns out to be Patrick Warburton, when he calls in on this TV show, that he's somehow otherworldly, not quite human, not the way we think about it, because he's a time traveler from 2,000 years in the future, and so he's different. And so when he calls into the radio show, Dale gets this feeling that this guy's special, and the translation emotionally for the audience was that floaty feeling on the jib. And see if you can see what I'm talking about here. I'll show you what I mean. Let me make this frame a little bit bigger for you so that you can catch this moment more effectively. Whoops. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, so tell me, why do you love vampires?
It started in college. My roommate invited this vampire into our room, which, she had this thing for guys who were sort of undead.
Yeah, Fanny, you know what? Hold that thought, all right?
Sway between the two, but
Mystery caller. Boy, am I glad to hear you. So what was the deal with last night's call?
Seth Douglas.
Yeah, pal, didn't you just do this last night? Really? I see. Right. Hey, look, friend, the $1,000 is yours, okay? Just tell us who you are. I gotta tell you, pal, the management was kind of underwhelmed with you. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm your biggest fan, but I gotta have something new here. No? Nothing? Okay. Next caller.
Wait! You must let me speak.
You can speak English?
You are the only one who can help me, Dale Sweeney.
All right, so you can see that last moment when Dale's about to hang up on the guy. If he doesn't tell him something, his name or what he's doing, what his business is, he's going to hang up on him, right? And so from that very high angle, that bird's eye view or that God's eye view inside the studio, the camera drops about, in that shot, I guess the camera was about 7 or 8 feet in the air, and it dropped to eye level across the desk from Dale at about 4 feet. So it was about a 3 or 4 foot drop down to eye level very quickly to get Dale's reaction when the character on the phone stops speaking gibberish and starts speaking English. Okay, so that was a critical moment. That was the first moment in the movie where the character communicated to Dale in his own language. Okay, every other time he'd been calling in speaking in his native language. So this was an important moment in the story where the connection's finally made between Dale and the alien speaks English. What? Okay, it was that basic reaction, and the whole idea was to generate that emotional response from the audience as well, that, what, you speak English? What? Right? And so that quick response, that drop from a high angle to an eye level angle very quickly on the jib was what the director wanted. And so it's a precise move. It took a few rehearsals to practice and then a few takes to get it in the can safely. But I think that you can see that it's a neat little moment that adds a lot of tension to what could be otherwise kind of a sort of boring scene or boring shot if it was done off the tripod. So try to think this way when you start planning your shot lists and your shot design for your projects. Okay, see if you can think of ways of getting that camera in places that don't involve a tripod. They involve some other means of support, whether it's a jib or a dolly or a handheld shot or a low angle dolly run or a big sweeping arc movement, something like that, and see if you can spice it up a little bit by picking some of these points of view that we don't normally get to see from a tripod, from the tripod's point of view. Okay, think about that. Think about these tools. I will endeavor to create some demo videos where you can see more of the jibs and the dollies in action. And I'll have more stuff for you next week when we talk about gimbals. Okay, but for now, I want to leave you with this stuff to think about and give you an idea of what your homework will be. So you got your downloadable PDFs off of web courses. You've got your cinematography theory and practice Blaine Brown text chapters, writing with motion, and coverage and continuity. Well, coverage and continuity, you're already you're past that now. You'll be quizzing on that on Monday. But certainly camera movement, writing with motion, and then check out the Laura Wells white paper, the downloadable PDF on camera movement. And if you got some time and you want to enjoy a lighthearted little film that's a lot of fun, I've put the entire theatrical release of Hey, I'll Believe You on web courses for you to check out. All right, that's all I have for you this week. Thanks so much. I appreciate your attendance. Go ahead and leave me a text message in the box before you hit submit so I know that you've seen the lecture. And I'll see you again next week for our final lecture on camera movement. That'll be lecture 13 in the series, where we will talk about handheld gimbal-assisted camera movement. All right, so for now, that's all I have for you. Thanks a lot, and I will see you next class. Have a good afternoon.